from a business standpoint, boy, I can't, it's such a well-organized company, Ian. I can't believe that they went into this not thinking like, okay, guys, curtain's going to go up. He's dead. We say James Bond will return. What's the next stage? What's phase 2 of this, two-phased approach? So I'm not too sure what's transpired because that was 5 years ago. How are you doing? It's great to see you, man.
Great to see you too. Why don't we just kick it off?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Where are you? I expected a different background.
Did you expect, what background did you expect? Now I'm curious.
I expected all Bond experience background, all the stuff in the background, the mannequins, all of the things.
Ah, yes. You're talking about my studio downstairs. No, this is the slightly more mundane office, which is still, it's got artwork and James Bond everywhere. Would not disappoint.
What's right behind you then?
So this is a Japanese artist who also does James Bond posters, who decided to immortalize me in this Japanese James Bond posters.
Wow.
Of which, the entire office is surrounded by them.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it. Oh, man. And I've been so looking forward to doing this for so many reasons. And first, I want to thank you for GoldenEye. And Commando Bond, Caleb Daniels, knew I was down there. I already knew who you were, but he linked us up personally. And I was at GoldenEye because I was starting to write my 007th novel down there, Red Sky Morning. And I wanted to go over and check out where Iam Fleming actually spent his time and wrote these books that have been so influential on me, to you, Bond community, the world in general, popular culture in general. And you made it happen. You made a call, and all of a sudden the doors opened. So thank you.
Well, first of all, you're very welcome. It was my pleasure. GoldenEye, as you can attest to, it's one of these magical moments that transports you. And I obviously knew of your work. And as a writer, all I can imagine is you going on this amazing vacation to GoldenEye, this escape, and suddenly not be able to sit where the maestro sat, the very individual that spurred you on. And no, it needed to happen.
Well, thank you so much. It was incredible. You're right there. So for people who don't know, GoldenEye is now a resort, but there is a part that you can still rent where Iam Fleming actually spent his time writing these novels, and you can kind of peek up, you can kind of like look and see it. But now I think they used to kind of give tours as part of the thing. I think maybe a long time ago, but they kind of cut that off. So only if you rent it or have the connection like you do can you work your way in.
It was shut down to tours 2 weeks before you went.
No way.
Which made it very fun to do. You were literally the last person to get into there, even to date, unless you rent it. And for your audience, just as a FYI, and there's nothing wrong with this, this is what they charge and they get this, it is anywhere from $12,000 to $14,000 a night.
Yeah.
So we sort of wove our way through there appropriately.
Thank you. And they let me spend all this time there, and it was just incredible. It was so incredible, and I have you to thank for that, so I sincerely appreciate it.
Did it motivate, because now I'm curious, I'm almost going to quid pro quo you, did it motivate a particular part of the new book?
Introducing the BCM Mark 15 timepiece. Rugged, purpose-built, American design, Swiss-made. engineered for precision and unwavering reliability. A flat sapphire crystal with dual-layer anti-reflective coating ensures clarity under any conditions. Its unidirectional 60-minute bezel delivers dependable performance when timing counts. Equipped with a satin stainless steel bracelet featuring a secure deployment clasp. Super Luminova X1 illuminates the hand's numerals and hour markers, offering visibility you can trust. With 200 meters of water resistance, the Mark 15 is built to endure. Each model is limited to just 200 pieces worldwide. Available now at BravoCompanyUSA.com. That is a good question. I don't think a part of it, because I'd been reading about it for so long. I'd seen so many videos online. I'd spent so much time on their website. But I'd seen the black and white videos from, I don't know how many there are, but there's at least one of Ian Fleming giving an interview from down there. The one where the interviewer asks him, would you ever see an end to Bond? And he goes, I love it because he's got the cigarette holder and the whole thing. And he's out there and he goes, I think he says something like this. He's like, my dear chap. And he takes a smoke. He's like, I couldn't possibly afford it.
Yeah, exactly.
It was fantastic. But no, I think it was more just being there, just the feeling of sitting in that chair and at that desk and looking out at that same view. And I can't wipe the smile off my face just thinking about being when I was there, which is now, a year and a half ago. But wow, such a special time. So special.
I'm so glad. Walking in those footsteps, you deserve to be a part of that, for sure.
Oh, well, thank you. And actually, I'm gonna grab the books over here. That's one thing I didn't grab was my stack of. I had the paperbacks over here. I'm gonna grab them real quick.
Do.
I meant to grab the paperbacks just in case we wanted to reference anything as we talk here. But I think the best way to kick things off after my thank you there is to ask you, man, what is going on with the Bond franchise right now? We just had the Wall Street Journal article that was it 2 weeks ago now? Fairly recent anyway, at the time of this recording, that talked about some friction between the two camps now that have some vested interest in Bond's future. And I think you did a video of it where you got to actually talk to, before the last Bond film came out, you guys had talked to Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson and talked to them in an interview for their promo. And what do you think? What's on the horizon? I guess what do you think is going to happen, and versus what you would like to see happen?
Oh, and those could be two different things. Yes. And by the way, thank you so much for not starting out small and going to the gigantic question in the room. What's going on with the Bond franchise?
Come in, right? Yeah, I want to go start with that.
Yeah, no small talk. That's it. Well, I will tell you this. I'm so used to, it's almost become white noise news. And for those of you with the cheap seats of the podcast and not watching on YouTube, I'm giving, the quote, rabbit ears. I hear something new, especially because of my channel and hobby. Every 2 weeks, I hear about a new actor or a new producer or a new director. So when I hear about potential infighting, what it probably is something that somebody heard and it's become elevated. And then you put it through the wonderful grinding of the media engine, who is bored and needs a little bit of news that day, especially in the UK. And then they announce something. What made me take stock in this, though, this time, Jack, is because they interviewed 20 people. So this was not one eyewitness or one recounting. This was 20. And there were some things that were feasible, like, quite frankly, Barbara Broccoli is a very strong individual with strong opinions. Could I see her calling Amazon effing idiots? I could see that. But any discord that they have to date that slowed down the franchise, I don't think it's a disconnect between Amazon and Eon. I really don't. I think it could be, I don't want to believe it's disinterest. Eon saying to themselves, we're moving on. But I do believe that it could be confusion. So right now you've got Eon, who maybe doesn't know what Bond needs to be when it grows up or what the audience wants, and Amazon saying, we'll just take anything. And that, to me, they're diametrically opposed to each other.
Yeah. I mean, you can see how Amazon would want to explore the possibility of doing a Marvel type universe with the Bond franchise. And you can see how Barbara Broccoli and that side would not want to do anything that isn't, because for people listening, let's say you do a series and that series has a budget and that's it's 5 episodes, it's 8 episodes, it's 12 episodes, it's 20 episodes, whatever it is. That part doesn't matter as much as how much the budget is for each one of those episodes. And when you're talking about the Bond franchise and talk about spinning something off, and I saw in that article maybe a Moneypenny spin-off or a this spin-off or we're going to do a series show. Well, you got to think about what a budget for a Bond film is and what they've delivered over all of these years, and then think about a budget for a television show and what you have the possibility of delivering in 8 episodes or 20 episodes or whatever you're gonna do there, and that would be very difficult to do when you're used to what they have delivered in the film franchise side of the house for so long. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But then also what adds to it is how they ended the last film.
Well, and that's the other elephant in the room. That first of all, they ended it by killing him. Second of all, they promised he'd be returning.
Right.
So talk about two heads not coming together as one. I'll say this about Eon. One thing I know about them through decades of nothing official but just engagements is they're in no hurry whatsoever, and they're very protective, appropriately, of not just the brand but the character of James Bond. So, like, you wouldn't want to dilute James Reese in any way, and you're rightfully so protective of your character. They are so protective that somebody like me that does videos on YouTube, for example, they've often informally engaged to make sure that they fit within the confines of the character. That's not an easy job.
No, but you are essentially you're protecting I guess you could say, I don't know if Marvel is more financially successful now, but certainly the longest running franchise and probably the most successful in film history, and you're connected to that in a very direct way, obviously with Broccoli and Wilson. Man, that's a big job.
It's a very big job. And to go back to your original question of what would I like it to be?
Yeah, what would you like to see happen?
Hi, this is Jack Carr, and I wanted to talk about some of the weapons used in the pages of my terminal list series. And we're to start with why it was important for me to include SIG P226, also in its variant known as the Mark 25, in my first novel terminal list. And that is because I used this particular pistol right here on every deployment. So this is the 226 right here, Mark 25 variant, and it just fits my hand like a glove, like it was just built for it. I always carried this pistol on me. If I had to put down my long gun to go into a meeting or go somewhere where I wasn't supposed to be armed downrange in Iraq or Afghanistan or a couple other places around the world, then I always had SIG in a holster, concealed right there. And right here you can see there's a commemorative pistol that SIG has out this year for the 40th anniversary of the SIG P226. And this one right here is a number of edition that we did for the terminal list. You can see right there on the top, it says terminal list. It's just an important pistol to me, so it made sense to include in the novel, and it blows the conspiracy wide open. It's just one of those things that if you're not a gun guy, you just wouldn't understand. And in the TV show, you can see Chris Pratt and Taylor Kitsch starring as James Reese and Ben Edwards talking about this on the boat in episode 1, where the SIG P226 plays a major role.
I don't buy it, man. No way. Boozer offs himself with this SIG. No way.
Something you had to know about Boozer to understand. He would never have shot himself with a 9mm. An outsider, trying to make it look like a SEAL suicide, would find it convenient to use the same type of handgun that SEALs were issued. What they couldn't know was that Boozer was a real gun guy who'd grown up shooting competitively before he'd ever even thought about joining the Navy to become a frogman. Boozer had a love affair with custom 1911s chambered in 45 ACP, which most people just would not understand. Boozer hated the 9mm. Even though he had a Sig P226 in his collection to commemorate the pistol all SEALs had carried into combat since 9/11, his disdain for the smaller round was part of his identity. And that right there blows the conspiracy wide open in the drum roll list.
This is my fantasy football moment, and everybody has one. I think we had a missed opportunity with Christopher Nolan and Henry Cavill. I think Henry Cavill would have made. Does this need to be the best actor in the world? Absolutely. Does he need to be capable? As I say, a capable character. I think Henry Cavill could have done that in spades. And then Nolan, as a director who desperately wanted to direct something and maybe even wanted to direct Cavill, could have delivered something very strong that would be commercially successful as well as characterly successful. What do you think about that?
I like it. Do you see, if that had happened, because I heard the rumors when that was going around, about a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, whenever that was. Also, as part of that, I think what was attached to some of those rumors were that did he want to do a period piece, or was that people projecting on him? Okay.
Projecting.
Okay. Because I think that would be very interesting. I think I've heard that from Caleb Daniels first as well. Not positive where I heard it first. But regardless, I think that would be a good way to go, especially after the way they ended the last movie. And if you're looking at the Craig films as it's kind of their own entity in this broader kind of universe, it's a very interesting thing because there's not a parallel to it. But if you did it as period pieces and you go back to the 50s and you take the books, the time that they're written, post-war Europe, and you do them as period pieces, much more closely associated with the books than just grabbing the great titles and attaching them to the films that sometimes have nothing to do with the actual books. But you go back to the source material, you go back to that original character, you go back to the books, and you do them as period pieces starting in 1953 or 1952 when it was written, and then came out in 1953, I believe. And you do them like that chronologically, and you work your way from 1952, 53 up to 1964, 65, when we have the posthumously published works.
I'll tell you something. I would be first online for a period piece. Let me tell you the two major issues.
Oh, there's a couple. There might be more. Yeah.
There's probably more, but the two major ones that I've discussed, and some of these I've actually discussed with James Bond brands, some of which you're wearing right now, some of which I'm wearing right now, is number one, they receive so much, I'll call it investment revenue from brand product placement. Wow. That it would be very difficult to do. You would lose the cars in many cases, right? You would lose some of the style, the fashion, the watches, etc. You would lose so many things.
You could go back to Rolex.
You might, right? You might. But I think Omega has it pretty sealed up for the future. That's all I'll say. But you would lose all of that. The second thing is, and this would not do my heart well, I don't think it would do yours as well. You clearly, those are well-loved paperbacks that I see on your desk of James Bond. And the problem is that I don't believe that Hollywood today, and I'll include the producers of Eon, would reflect the books in an accurate way in today's Hollywood. I think you would get maybe a version of it, but I don't know if we as fans would be happy with the version that we would receive. Does that make sense?
It does. And for those who know the Bond films and are just kind of more casual observers and don't go back to Dr. No film-wise or Russia with Love film-wise and kind of know the formula of Goldfinger onward, the books if you stayed so close to the books, they wouldn't necessarily deliver in the way that the films have delivered since Goldfinger onward. I don't think. It might be a little bit off there, but I don't think. But it would be interesting, especially needing to figure out what do you do when you kill off the most successful franchise character in history. What do we do next? A way to reboot that is to go back to the 50s. Like that, I think people can wrap their heads around that. Oh, okay, I got it. Rather than just whatever they're going to do as a contemporary film in a few years. That's going to be very interesting. What do we do? Oh, James Bond was 007 was just a number attached to multiple people throughout the years.
I'm going to give you a forecast, which may date in a couple of years as badly as Taylor Swift.
When it says staccato, it comes with a promise. In any condition, at any moment, this gun is ready because your life and the lives you protect depend on it. The future of the 2011 begins with the HD line. Narrower grip with no grip safety. You can run your pistol in either hand with fully mirrored controls and ergonomics. Uses widely available, reliable magazines in a variety of capacities so you can stock up on more mags for less money. Allows common duty optics to be attached directly to the slide instead of to a plate. Staccato. Engineered for performance. Built for freedom.
I'll say this. I think they're going to have a very soft reintroduction where there isn't going to be a reboot in the sense that you're not going to see Bond get his 00 again. They're not going to go back to the Casino Royale moments. They're going to show a Bond that's 3 or 4 years into his tenure, maybe 5. So he's slightly more seniored Bond, certainly not as senior as me, but late 30s, early 40s Bond, as opposed to starting from the beginning. And they're going to ignore that it happened, that was a different era, a different version, a different Doctor Who moment that happened. Because they've done that, and a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people don't realize that in the Bond franchise, they have ignored quite a few things. They paid homage to certain other films, but they've ignored many others as well.
Oh yeah, but they've gotten away with it because the character didn't die.
Listen, here's the hard part, Jack. I mean, 2 fans waxing poetic about James Bond. I am sitting here as we speak. By the way, I grew my Jack Carr homage beard. This is my prop.
Well, also because we're at the end of a Christmas holiday as well.
Oh, maybe that's the real reason. Okay.
Oh, nice watch. I like it.
So I'm wearing the No Time to Die watch.
Right there.
Perfect.
And then this one here. Thank you also for linking me up in New York.
Yeah.
Right there. Love that.
Beautiful.
Look at that presentation right there. I mean,
beautiful. Gosh. Showing the 60th anniversary. Love that.
Yeah, amazing.
And by the way, to even, freak out your audience even further of how our fandom goes to a different level. Jack is wearing the RGT jacket from No Time to Die.
You might notice that. And
oh, is that the Sunspell?
No, he has the
Olabar Brown.
Yeah, that's it. The brown. How do you say the first part?
Olabar Brown. Yeah.
Olabar Brown. Yep. Even though that far.
Olabar Brown. Very good. And I'm wearing the Tommy Bahamas No Time to Die retirement shirt that Bond wears. So here we are, a little upset about a movie that we're wearing pieces from. What's that all about?
Yeah. Well, it shows the cultural significance, or not even cultural significance you can see, but the personal impact that Ian Fleming has had through his character, his creation, James Bond, on us. And I think we represent a large number of people. And if box office receipts are anything to or any indication, it's more than a few.
The Bond style has been this, I'll call it a great equalizer. It doesn't know politics. It doesn't know religion. It doesn't know height or weight. It doesn't know anything other than an appreciation for the sartorial storytelling and heritage of these pieces in connection to one character. And I think you did such a beautiful job of paying this off in your latest book, Red Sky Morning, because there are so many, if you know, Easter egg moments, but you've always, in all of your books, you've gone back to really, like Fleming, exploring the brands and making people really feel like they're immersing themselves in the moment and the items. I mean, it really is such a descriptive way to do it.
Thank you. And there were a couple authors had done it, not the way that Fleming did it, but there were a couple authors had done it in the 40s and 50s, but it was noticed when Ian Fleming did that with the brands. People didn't really talk about it. Those other authors, maybe they put in something, but not in the way that Fleming did it, and not with multiple different products the way Fleming did it. Someone maybe in a book in the 40s and 50s mentioned one item, but for the most part, it was the person picked up the shotgun or picked up the pistol or got in the car, that sort of a thing. Looked at their watch. it wasn't necessarily looked at the Rolex or got in the Bentley blower with the supercharger, or all of those things, or carried the specific pistol, which got corrected later on. This is a 25, which I forget the exact story, but someone wrote to him that said that's a lady's gun, a lady's like purse gun, and so he switched over, and later we'd get this. But there's other pistols in the books as well that are specifically mentioned by name. So Fleming was really the first person to do that in a way that was noticed by readers and critics alike.
Yeah, and he wasn't doing it because of obviously product placement or payment whatsoever. These were things that he personally owned. And interestingly, the character of James Bond, he wasn't the most descriptive with product placement with him. It was the villains. The villains had the 3.5 pages of, describing Tattinger and, the things that they wore and Sunspell or Sea Island cotton. Bond was very generic. He wore a blue Sea Island top and bottom. He wore black loafer shoes and he wore a Rolex Explorer. Done. But the villains were the ones, and it really made me think that Fleming was one of the first authors to think about the ego behind branding, potentially, and even how villains would lean more towards product identity than anybody else. I mean, you and I have gotten into the whole heritage and characterization of it, but it is an interesting study of it.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's very natural, and we'll never know, but we can make assumptions that. For Fleming, it also added authenticity. He lived in a world where he knew how to mix a drink. He knew how to enjoy a drink and a meal, and cars and all the rest of it. So those things were very real to him. And in my books, same thing. There's no paid product placement. Even in the TV show, no paid product placement in the TV show also, which is interesting. For the Terminalist, we got to put things in there because they would add to the story or add to a character or tell you a story about that character. And that's how I look at them in the books as well, in that it adds authenticity to it, because I'm not just going online and looking at, what kind of a knife would a bad guy, or something like that. What knife would a SEAL use, or whatever it is. It's all things that come from my personal experience, and those get woven in to the book. So someone never just picks up a knife. That's very odd to me. I just couldn't do. I couldn't. It has to say something about the character or the location that they're in, the country that they're in. Like, it has to speak to the story, speak to the character, and so all those things become ways to develop that character. And I think it was similar to Fleming. He knew those worlds, which is why we get so much food and we get the cigarettes and we get all those things, because those were part of his world and added an authenticity to his writing. It would be very weird to not know the type of cigarette or lighter or whatever is being used in these novels, because it was just natural for him to know what this character would use and put in there. So I think it was a very natural thing for him, and it became a very natural thing for me as well.
You do such a nice job of it. I think where Fleming's audience appreciated him doing it was they needed it in a time where they needed to escape. War, post-war, pre-war. A simple thing like an avocado pear dessert. And I'm thinking, like, what? A pear? Just a pear. And we take for granted now, this was such an incredible commodity for people in luxury back then, never mind a Rolex watch. Today, what I think they've done nicely in the Bond franchise, even in the movies, is they still keep to those luxury brands. But every now and then they'll slip in something that makes sense. For example, the jacket that you're wearing, when I interviewed the Siderat, who is the costume designer for No Time to Die, I said, talk to me about what goes through your head when you think about picking that jacket. And she said, I simply wanted to look like a jacket of Bond. He sort of lost his way, and it's something he could have stolen off of a rack in a diner or on a ship or something like that. And even the trench coat that he wears at the end of No Time to Die. Now, that is just for people playing at home, that is a $1,500 luxurious jacket. Trust me when I say this. It's a trench coat. It's not for everyone. But she wanted it to look a little disheveled, as if he was, at the time, rescued by a boat. He was in the dinghy. And some, naval person had it hanging on a peg and he stole it. So she thinks about, what are these things that Bond wouldn't necessarily walk into a store and shop for? What are these things he could take along on his journey? And that's the storytelling properties of of objects.
I love that. Because this was a very odd one to me when I got it. It was because I put it in the last book. Also, I have my character has it and wears it in the last book, which is why I have it. I try to if I have them in the books, I try to acquire them along the way as I'm writing and add them to the collection. But it was a very odd jacket for Bond to wear. I think it's a California company. I think
California, all American made, and it's a couple. It's a husband and wife that does everything.
Oh, is it? Oh, interesting. Yeah. They were fantastic. I think I tagged them in something, and they reached right back out. They were fantastic. But yeah, bought this along the way, and I think I found out it probably through your channel is probably how I found out exactly which one to get. Possibly. I would guess.
I have a lot of spouses that give me the evil eye. That are like, you're the reason why packages show up to my house.
Yes, I get the same thing at book signings when the husbands and wives come through. Usually it's the wife, not always, looking at me and kind of like, yes, this is why we have a Land Cruiser and why we have P35 pistol or a 226 or whatever else, and all the gear that I describe in the books. But I do get that probably at every stop at least once.
As we were talking about Fleming and objects, I mean, there was a question, if you don't mind, that I wanted to ask you about as I'm reading your books. How much of the world of Bond and you sinking your teeth into the literature aspects of Bond motivated you to sit down on your very first outing to write something and say, something, I think I know what Fleming's itch was. I've got it. I need to do this.
It wasn't that kind of a moment because I knew from such an early age that I was going to write eventually, and I knew that my military time would come first. But my mom is a librarian, so I grew up surrounded by books and a love of reading. About fifth grade is when I start reading the same kind of books my parents are reading, where you make that transition from young adult literature into the same kind of novels that I read and write today. And certainly by sixth grade, that's what I'm reading. And I'm reading First Blood and Brotherhood of the Rose and Fraternity of the Stone, League of Night and Fog by David Morrell. And I'm reading the Nelson DeMille's of the day as contemporary thrillers. But then I'm going back and reading all those books that were on my parents' shelves or on the shelves of our cabin up in the mountains. And those were the Jean Le Carrés. Those were the Ken Folletts. Those were those authors from the 50s, 60s, 70s that as a kid I'm looking up at that I can't yet read, but by the time we get to the mid 80s, now those are time capsules that take me back to 1978, 75, 73, 71, 68, 65, 63, 58, 55. And so those are time capsules now. Now I'm reading those things not as contemporary thrillers because they're the ones that have been on the shelves, but the ones that I'm reading as contemporary thrillers are like the Tom Clancy's and the next David Morrell that comes out or the next Nelson DeMille that comes out, because those are the ones now I'm able to read those things. But of course, we have Ian Fleming, who has passed by that time, of course. So I'm going and reading those. And Le Carré at the time was still with us, but he had written books from the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s. So I'm reading both contemporary thrillers and those older ones, but I'm enjoying it so much that I know in the future I will write these kind of books. And I have this foundation of contemporary thrillers and then ones that take me back in time, like the Flemings and reading all of the Bond books and everything else that are now part of my experience and a part of my foundation that I will build upon later. But I'm reading them as a fan. I'm reading them because I love the magic in those pages. And by reading those books, watching the films, even watching TV shows of the day, all of those things are now a part of me, just like they're a part of everyone's experience, is a part of of who they are and make who they are today. So it wasn't necessarily me waking up one day and saying, this Bond book or Ian Fleming in particular are going to have motivated me to start this right now. It was more a sense of time, meaning I always knew I would write. I always knew I'd be a SEAL as I got to the end of that time in the SEAL teams, and it was time to move on. What am I going to do next? I already knew. I'm going to write. Not only do I already know that I'm going to write, I've already done all this work throughout my entire life at a time when I didn't look at it as work, building this foundation upon which to build. And I don't have to start now and go back and read Fleming and read Le Carré and read David Morrell and read Ludlum and I've already done all those things from the fan perspective, and which I think helps because you're not looking at it in a way that you're wasting bandwidth worried about why you're reading. You're only in those pages for the story. That's it. Not, oh, I'm going to read this book because I know I should read it because I want to do something similar, which is taking bandwidth away from this enjoyment of the story and how you're incorporating it into who you are as a person, as a reader. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily an aha moment, but Fleming has been part of my experience from my earliest memories, watching movies with my dad, reading the books, and so have all these other authors at the same time. So he's a significant part of that foundation, of course, because of the books and because of the films, obviously, that are have had such an impact on popular culture in general. So for me, he's a significant part of it because of that. Not necessarily because I pinpoint one and think, oh, I'm going to try to do that also. No, not quite like that.
I hope people appreciate, because I do now, how important that journey is that you just recollected. Because I think some people write from creating data and research, right? They do the research, they get the data creates insights, the insights create the writing experience. You've come with all this experience of feeding and fueling as a fan on this literature, and Bond is one aspect of many. And then you put it through, obviously, your military filter, and what we have coming out of that is James Reese and all the adventures. I will say, though, the reason I asked that question, what motivated me is not every author that I've experienced or encountered writes fallible characters as well as you and Fleming. And I put you in the same regard. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is it's really hard to create a hero or anti-hero, however you want to view James Bond and James Reese, having this wonderful fallibility of being a human and making mistakes and not doing the right thing always, or from a morality standpoint, but doing the right thing as it's necessary to do. And I've defended James Bond, and maybe you've done this with James Reese. I've defended James Bond for as long as I've been a fan, especially now being in the eye of the public. When people come to me and go, oh, he's a murderer, he's an assassin, he's misogynistic, he's got these old world terms, he's a relic from the Cold War and all these things. And I say, well, but hold on a second. And then you talk about the fallibility of everyone as an individual. And I said, I have a trouble looking at Superman and saying to myself, you know what? He's relatable. I get him. What a day he's had. Nobody does that to Superman. Yeah. But to James Bond or James Reese or anything like that, there's a little mix of, oh, been there. And then that other mix of, he's such an incredibly capable character. Both Jameses, by the way, that you get this sort of emulation aspect going on. Oh, if I could have only done that, or if I could have that level of capability, that I could be more like that character. And I think the audience really gravitates to that. You do it so well.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I think another piece of it is, so I didn't think about this until recently, actually, when I went back and I didn't read the whole Shakespeare book because it's a very thick book and I was in the middle of writing, but I've certainly referenced it a lot during my, and I'm going to read the whole thing cover to cover eventually, but I would go to certain parts of it. And I know you have to interview him on your channel as well. So I got to watch that. That was fantastic. But I used a lot of that for some of the more nuanced portions of Red Sky Morning when I wanted to put things in there that only certain people would understand were references to Bond. I put a couple things in there that, yeah, if you've watched a few of the movies, you probably get. But there was a lot more in there that was only written for like you and Caleb Daniels and a few people in the Bond community. There's a lot in there that was just that. And I loved doing that. But I think also we have, and in doing that, I think I understood it before, but because I had been reading these books and watching the movies from such an early age, I didn't come to it at a time where it clicked that these are books of a certain time when they're still rationing in the UK and Europe. They're still rationing after World War II. That Bond is a veteran of World War II, as was Fleming. So I came to that understanding later. But similar to when I write the books now, I'm taking feelings and emotions from events that I was involved with downrange, applying them to a completely fictional narrative. And I can only think that Fleming did something similar and took those war experiences and applied them to fictional narratives, or the feelings and emotions behind certain things, or things that he wished could have happened or thought might have happened if only this. But those experiences worked their way into the books in ways that are not maybe so obvious at first glance, but you realize that, well, World War II was a big part of Ian Fleming's life. And so it is only natural that one would go back to those experiences and weave those into the pages of a novel, whether the reader's going to realize it or not. So there's that authenticity piece that is so important today. And then also, Bond is on a journey in the books. James Reese is on a journey. He is learning from past mistakes and applying that wisdom going forward. And that is also something that every single person in the world has in common, is that we're all on journeys. We're all on this journey. So rather than just being a character that I pick up and drop in, oh, now he's going to save the world from a nuclear bomb. Now he's going to save the world from a bioweapon. Now he's going to do so. But it's the same character each time. No, he's learning from these past experiences, and he's morphing. He's on a journey just like you and I are, just like anyone reading the books are. Is anyone in the planet is on a journey, whether they realize it or not. And so I think having those characters also on a journey, whether people realize it or not, whether maybe it's just part of the subconscious, they're on this journey with the character. So that's something you have in common with this person. When you mentioned Superman having hard to find something in common with him, well, everyone has something in common with James Bond and James Reese because they're on journeys, and they're and it's not exactly the same person each time. Even in Casino Royale, he's not the exact same person at the end as he is in the beginning, and that's because of the experience that he goes through in the book. So yeah, it's fascinating. I love talking about this stuff, and I love writing, and I love the films, and I love the whole thing.
Oh no, it's great.
I shall not seek the nomination of my party for another term as your president.
You could get into the whole psychology of it too. There's a term that I love that I've adopted over time called projection, where somebody watching a movie or somebody reading something where they get so engrossed into it, so into the character that they project themselves into the character's journey, as you state. And because of that, the stress and the tense situations suddenly stop becoming the characters. It's not James Reese anymore. It's David Zaritsky reading through James's eyes. And when you can do that as an author, and when you can have that experience and engagement, that relationship, I'll call it, with a reader, where they're starting to not just forecast what James Reese should do or James Bond should do. You know, it's why people start shouting at a movie screen, like, don't go in there, whatever you do. They're projecting themselves into that moment. You know you've won. Yeah. When it stops becoming a piece of literature, you know you've won, and they're a part of the story, and they're on that journey. And I would like to think, maybe I'm being romantic here, that people still watch movies and still go to the theater and still crack open the spine of a book and, you know, not just consume it other ways, not that there's anything wrong with that, but do that because they want to escape from one journey, which may not be going well, to somebody else's journey, which still has its ups and downs and conflicts, but there's some sort of resolution at the end, and you know that.
Yeah, well, you can learn so much, even from the fiction or from movies. Like, I'm not a sports person, meaning I grew up my dad would watch football, but I wasn't really interested in football. I was interested in flipping the channel. And back in the 70s, 80s, I was the remote control, and you actually had to go physically move the dial. And there was only a few, there's ABC, CBS, NBC, and then there was one outlier channel that we had, and it was
like a PBS or something like that.
There's PBS, and then there's a PBS, and then there was this other thing out there that usually had a war movie on Sundays. And so that was the one that I was interested in. I was interested in that side of things. And so you can learn so much from popular fiction, from film and television, just because of maybe just a line, just one line in there, like, the Marshall Plan, like, wonder what the Marshall Plan is here. I can go look into that. I'm 9 years old, and I feel like the author is writing this in a way that assumes I should know, which means I'm going to go look up some more things about the Marshall Plan. But it's written in a way where, I understand that this is the rebuilding of post-war Europe. Like, I get it from the context, but I should probably know more about it. And I love that Fleming did that. A lot of authors that I read growing up did that. I do that as well. But it's also helped make me the person that I am today. So it's interesting. There's Fleming gets a lot of heat, of course, from critics. It's very easy to like Jean le Carré. It's very easy to say that you love a Jean le Carré novel. It is as a critic, and let's say at a cocktail party or something like that. It's different when you say that you're a fan of Ian Fleming. In those same circles, there's a little bit of snobbery attached to it, kind of like the same people that say they only read nonfiction, or only read nonfiction. Like, that's the only place where you can learn something is from. That's why I spend my time only in nonfiction. So it's interesting. I was curious to get your thoughts on this as well. Do you sense that there's a little a snobbery attached to the literary world when it comes to Fleming versus Le Carré, or literary world in general, publishing in general?
I'll do a quick. I agree with you, yes, but I'll expand on that and actually go back to the 50s when there was snobbery back then with Ian Fleming's books. They were considered total trash. Talk about pulp fiction for, horny schoolboys, they called it. That's all this is good for.
That's right. Didn't they say that? Yeah. Was it The Guardian, or who said that? Who had the
like 50% of the reviews when the first 2 or 3 books came out, they all said the same thing. Especially, Casino Royale comes out, their heads blew off, and Noel Coward, one of his best friends, artist and writer, etc., well accomplished playwright, said it was absolute dreck. And then even when it became successful, now you think success, which, I don't know, culturally speaking, I think different geographies in the world have different, they have problem with success. Either you have people applaud you for the success, or there's jealousy for the success, or they try to rip people down. You get the whole gamut. In Ian Fleming's case, it was a little bit sad because even when he had financial success and the movies were starting to get made, they still called it, Ian's little cute little disgusting project. I think as we fast forward today, now this is, arguably one of the biggest fans in the world talking, so I'm going to be very biased with James Bond. I think it's gone up a level that if I crack open an Ian Fleming book on an airplane, nobody's going to look at me like it's porn. Nobody's going to look at me like, what a dastardly person. They're going to say, they're reading the literature, a James Bond book, which has been a part now of the zeitgeist of our culture. James Bond as a film is part of the zeitgeist. And even, I would like to say, outside of a small skirmish of individuals, the Connery movies have become classics. Oh, yeah. Like From Russia with Love, you could argue is right there with North by Northwest and some of the other classic films.
Absolutely.
So I think in some ways, happily, it's become more accepted. But in the literature realms, because my vocation is not James Bond, my vocation is the pharmaceutical world. If I was to go into a soiree and a very fancy party and everybody's going around talking about what they're reading and consuming, and if I said, I'm reading Dr. No, and I've got sand from Jamaica that's falling out of it. They'll look at me a little bit sideways.
Which would have been different 10 years ago if you said you were reading Le Carré.
Here we go. Yes. Yeah. But you're right. So times they do change. And then on top of that, not to make this even more of a dimensional conversation than it needs to be, nowadays you might even get, what version of James Bond are you reading? Are you reading the edited version or are you reading the non-edited version?
There is that. I couldn't bring myself to get the new collection. I'll probably do it at some point, just kind of have it.
Can you tell me why?
Because there are those time machines. So for me, it's a time machine back to 1953 in Casino Royale. And each one is a time machine back to that year. And so when you change it, well, now it's not necessarily a time machine back then anymore. Now it's more of a contemporary thriller because of the language used, or we changed this paragraph because we were a little uncomfortable with it, the way that Fleming described this, that, or the other. So now that time machine's been warped. I'm on a different track. So it's on a different, I'm not going directly back to 1953. I'm going back-ish, but now I'm on a different track here. And I'm this 1953, a reimagined 1953 by somebody in 2022, 23, whenever they did whenever they did those new versions. And so it's different. It's different. So I don't want to be manipulated by someone today when I'm going to a primary source material, essentially, for my transport back to 1953. And that's what they've done. So that's my thing.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Gosh, the way you describe it, and I think Stephen King may have stolen this from you as well, the whole time machine aspect of it. I've heard him say that as well. You're right. These are time machines. And look, like the butterfly effect, if you change just one little thing. And I'll say the problem I have in even owning the edited versions is that Ian Fleming himself did edit. He did edit Live and Let Die. He edited it for the USA audience. But that was his decision. And they went through him and they okayed it and they did it. Okay. Ian Fleming's not around anymore. You obviously his custodians, his family, and I respect them as well. But the problem is that any editorial of a dead person's work is assumptive. And I need it to be whole. If you change a painting because, the mustache was too thick and you want to thin it out because deep mustaches freak people out, what's the level to which it goes from it's okay to it's not okay? How much can be changed for somebody to say, something, I think you went too far? Who is that individual that says there's a tipping point?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's tough because also I do like choice as well. But man, I want to read the originals and I'm going to stick to that. Do you think that this is related? Do you think there's a guilt associated with the Fleming heirs when it comes to Ian Fleming? Meaning, why would you go and change this? And some of the other choices that they've made as well, and some of the choices we'll see further made in the films. Do you think there's like a guilt associated with how successful they were and how much more successful everything was after he passes away due to the films? And he sadly never got to see when Goldfinger hit the screen. It was right before that Goldfinger hit the screen that he passed away. So you didn't get to see the global phenomenon that it became after that film, the third film. Do you think that there's some sort of like a guilt associated with just how much wealth was amassed because of Ian Fleming, but we're kind of a little bit embarrassed about some of the language that he used or the way that he lived or some of the interviews that he gave. So we're trying to make up for that a little bit by changing the books or by veering off in this other direction with some of the spin-offs or some of the continuation novels. I want to ask you about those as well that might be significantly different from Ian Fleming's or what he would have imagined. Do you think there's some sort of like a guilt involved or a moral vanity perhaps that is connecting them to something in the past that they can't get away from, but that pays the bills? I don't know.
The answer may surprise you. So I'd almost rather it be the family feeling guilty, let's say, or the custodians feeling guilty or not feeling like, oh, this represents who the family is today, as opposed to we need to change this for the audience. We need to change this for financial reasons because the new audience, the new readership is not going to stand for this. They won't read a book like this. Now, to that second version, I would say this. If somebody has an issue with what was in the Fleming books that they've changed, chances are they're not reading James Bond. They're not reading James Reese. They're just not. They're not gravitating to this. I think this is something, and again, I'm not going to get on a soapbox here, but there's something going on here in the arts in general, and I include movies. I include, again, plays, that people believe there's this non-existing mysterious audience that wants it a certain way and refuses to have it tarnished. This fallibility that I keep saying. But to me, if it's guilt, then that's something very personal. That's a family decision that they're making. But I have a sneaking suspicion they're trying to make it so they open it up to new readers that would have never thought of reading a Fleming book otherwise.
Or we have a psychologist in here and they could ask some questions and say, oh, is that just the excuse?
Oh,
I don't know.
It could be. Hey, this is a real topic.
It is. Hey, yeah, you can talk about it. I'll watch it. When you have it on the Bond Experience. So.
I mean, but really, invite psychologists and people like that. It's interesting. There was a term that I've never heard before, and I'm sure you live and breathe by this term. I'd love to get your opinion on it. But when this news broke that the Fleming Foundation was putting out these books, Fleming Publishing, and they said that they had gone through sensitivity readers. I had never heard that term before in my life.
I have not heard
what
that.
A sensitivity reader. Have you heard this?
I have not heard that. Nope.
Oh, I thought this was an industry term, perhaps.
I mean, it's if it is, it's one that certainly no one's ever brought up to me. Probably for good reason.
Or nor should they.
They know how I'd react.
From what I understand, they had sensitivity readers. I don't know who they were, what their background is, but that would be interesting to know what's the profile of a sensitivity reader that has to go through and determine which words are taken out versus which words are kept.
Interesting. Oh, no, I have not heard that term. I'm going to ask my publisher about it, though. And I'll let you know what they say. But yeah, no one's ever brought that up to me.
Make sure you put in all your contracts that you forbid them to be involved ever.
Oh, they know better than to even ask. I think that's, that's interesting, though. And it's strange. And I feel so lucky also that I've never had anything suggested to me from New York Publishing about what I should do next or what I should change content-wise. Almost no content edits from New York. And I was on, maybe 4 years ago now. I was on I think it was like a Zoom panel with other authors, and they started talking about something called an editorial call. And I was like, I'm still the newest person on this panel, but things are going, well. And I'm kind of like nodding my head, and then I asked, what is an editorial call? I've never had one. And apparently it's when you sit down with your editor, maybe a couple other people, and they discuss what your next book's going to be about, what direction it's going to go, or the character's going to go, that sort of a thing. They can give their input to you as an author. None of that. I've never had a single, certainly not official, and not even anything unofficial, not even a hint from my agent, from my editor, publisher. 100% complete creative control. So I feel very fortunate in that respect. So yeah, no sensitivity readers.
I almost feel like nowadays there should be a good housekeeping seal of approval on some books like yours. It says 100% organically grown.
Yeah. Well, well, there's that.
Unfiltered, unrestricted.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that. And then one step further, even, or in parallel, I guess, would be this book was not created by AI.
I do like that.
Because in the future, it might be a question. Kind of like, remember when was it? Was it the late 80s when they started putting the explicit warning things on,
it was.
on
Yes.
tapes and CDs and stuff? So something like that, but on a book, I think you should know as that consumer that if AI, so something other than the author's personal experience or whatever else lent itself to this story that you're about to spend hard-earned money on, and this trust that you put in this author, you're trusting time to this author, you're never going to get that time back. But it'd be nice to know if AI helped in that creation. So I think having a little thing on there that says if it did or didn't might be useful to the customer, to the consumer, to the reader.
I love that. I mean, they put all types of warnings. And by the way, if the Ian Fleming publications had put out 2 versions of the books, hey, here's the untarnished, unfiltered version. Here's one that, if you have some sensitivities, it's been through sensitivity readers with like a diatribe of like, hey, here are the filters it's been through. Yeah. So now it's homogenized skim milk as opposed to full fat vitamin D. Then at least we have the choices. But I love what you're talking about. And I almost wish they did that with movies. So there have been so many movies that have come out, as you know, that the creators kind of look at the movie and go, I don't know what happened. It went through the Hollywood committee, the corporate committees, and it came out like poop, as opposed to my original creation. I know, you could talk about Zack Snyder and people like that had another go at it and changed it back to their original version. But wouldn't that be interesting if we had those sort of anti-warnings on things?
Yeah. I mean, it might be coming in the future. Or a piece of art. Let's say you go buy a piece, you walk into a gallery, and let's say you're here in Park City. There's a gallery every other shop on Main Street, and you walk in and you see this painting that really speaks to you, and you're like, oh wow, this is beautiful. Whatever it might be, a mountainscape or a elk or whatever, and oh, this is so beautiful. I want to buy this. Oh wow, look at that price tag. That's pretty significant. But I really love this, and I'd love to look at this every day. And then you buy it and put it on put it on the wall of your cabin or take it home with you or whatever else, have it shipped. And then only later find out that it was made by AI. It would be nice, I think, to know ahead of time that it was, and you get to decide if this painting, it's made by AI, it doesn't matter to me. I still love it for what it is. That's amazing. Or made by AI. I don't want something that it is the accumulation of a computer essentially generating all this thing. I want a person and their experience in the art world and their personal experience and their anguish and whatever they're putting up on this painting. I want it to know that it comes from that signature there, and only their experience, not somebody else's that became part of a algorithm in a computer that spit out this elk or this thing. So knowing would be good. So similar with books, knowing that this is, I understand it. I don't care who, if a computer made a quarter of this, half of this, all of this, that's okay. If fine by me, I'm just going to grab it anyway. It's going to be a good read. Okay. You get to choose though. You're not being tricked into thinking that it's this author when it is in fact helped by AI. I don't know. This
could be coming, because I don't think we're going to stop, excuse the pun, the AI engine, if you will, of more people utilizing it for whatever means. But I think that just like with consumables, when we eat food, you can read the story of how those things were manufactured, and you can make the correct choices based on labels and information. I think that, when it comes to the world of art and movies and literature and things like that, having those type of labels wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah. No, it wouldn't be. So they might be coming. Maybe we invented something right here on the podcast. But it would have been interesting had the Fleming estate put out 2 new versions of each of the books, because I'm a sucker for a new collection, a new artwork associated with the book. Oh, great! Oh, I'd love to put this on my shelf.
The covers,
yes, I would have bought them for sure. But because they were changed, I didn't. But I did read the only passage that I read, and I forget where I read this, but I think it was from Live and Let Die, and it had maybe a paragraph, possibly 2, original, and then the changed one, those same 2 paragraphs. And the changed ones, I mean, they weren't bad. It was fine. It was good. Yeah. But I knew it wasn't this. It wasn't the original. Right. So. And so it diverts that time machine. It takes me back through to a different dimension, I guess, and not the one that was actually 1953.
Yeah, and I'm not backpedaling here, but I'm hard pressed to ding the Fleming Publication Group, because I like what they're doing. They're at least putting out content. To tell you a very quick story, it's a literature story, so I think you'll get a kick out of it. When they were releasing these versions, they had come to me, and I still have all the communications, and said, hey, would you like to own a book? Meaning you will own the launch of, for example, For Your Eyes Only, or one of the books. And I was like, that would be amazing. My channel would own a book to the world. That would just, it's big. It's just, and I became very excited. And they said, yeah, we've made some changes. And as soon as they said that, I said, I need you to supply me of all the changes in the book. To your point, I needed to say, is it a the to an and? Is it a T to an E?
Oh, it was more than that.
And I saw them and I made the choice. And I said, you know something? I'm afraid I'm not going to do the launch. Now, the ego part of me, the content creator part of me, would have loved to have been associated with the Ian Fleming publication launch of James Bond books out into the world again. But there was a part of me, the bigger part of me, that said, you know something? It just doesn't feel correct. And it was one of these things I did, and I don't know if I've even told that story publicly before this, but I did make a conscious choice not to do it.
Oh, wow. Wow. Interesting. How did they take it?
I think very well. I mean, you know, I'm a fan of some of their stuff. It's not like they wrote a poison pen letter or anything like that. Or, you know, they're a polite, organized group of individuals that I'm sure made their decisions based on whatever they felt was right. And I had to make my decisions based on what I felt was right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Well, so we're talking about the books. So I have a lot of different versions. But I love the paperbacks. Like, this is one of my favorites right here. You Only Live Twice, that one right there. I love that paperback cover right there. So cool. Got the samurai on there. And I just love these old SIG versions right here. And like Thunderball is a great one too, right there. Just love that cover. So I grab these every time I see a complete set that looks like it's in good condition. I snatch them up. But of course we also have going back to earlier when you talked about the first book and the second book, and then we get up to here From Russia with Love, and we have Kennedy. Of course, yes. John F. Kennedy putting it on his. I think it was reading list. Was it in what? Was it in Life? What magazine was that in? It was like in Life magazine or People or something like that.
We say the wrong one, we're going to get hate mail. So let's just say a very popular magazine.
So you're smart. You go right. You go right.
I know the game.
Beginning. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and even went so far as to say not only in a reading list, but on his nightstand. I mean,
is there a photo of it? Do they have a photo of it on his nightstand?
They don't have a photo of it, but they have quotes, you know, that he said that. And what's amazing about that is the very reason why I think you like the paperbacks is why I like them. Number one, the portability, the artwork, the fact that you can throw it on a nightstand or throw it in a tote bag or throw it in a briefcase and just go places. Even, I don't know about you, this is, maybe you're going to have me locked up after this, but the pulpy smell. Yeah. The old smell of the pages, right?
That's right.
That's a thing, right?
That's the same smell that was in our cabins, was attached to books as a kid. It takes me right back.
I remember coming from school and going to my library, which who goes to a library anymore? And there was a smell of time and paper.
Yeah.
And what happens to paper over time. And these paperbacks, when you read them, it's this olfactory like nostalgia that comes into play. But I think Kennedy not only found connection to the character, and I don't think there were a couple people that are snarky and say, oh, it was probably a publicity thing. And I don't think so. I think it goes back to that emulation of capable individuals gravitating to capable individuals. You know, that whole success begets success. And him realizing that this is a character that he can't do everything that he would like to do. But you know what? Bond's doing it. Yeah. So he can live sort of vicariously through that.
Yeah. And is that why, is it true? Is that why we got From Russia with Love as the second movie? Because Kennedy suggested that it become the second movie?
I think that's why it was put to the top.
Yeah. I mean, and it became a classic, like you mentioned before, and one that stands on its own amongst movies of the day, not just as a James Bond movie, but as a movie of that time period before things really changed with Goldfinger. So, From Russia with Love, I probably growing up, we had the RCA video disc, and I meant to grab one to bring it in here to show you because I have most of the Bonds on video disc, and so that was the one that not a laser disc. Not that. No, this is a video disc from 1978, 79 time frame, which is like a record for those listening. So not a laser disc. It is a record that is, I think, red with I think a physical Leica record, because it would skip. So you'd had to put them in. You had about 35 minutes per side, and you'd put this thing in, and it's the size of a record, but you'd put it in the machine, and you pull out the plastic piece, and it would leave the record, the plastic disc inside, not laser disc. It'd leave this plastic disc inside. You'd watch it, and then you'd get to 35 minutes, and it would stop, and you'd have to go in, push this thing back into the machine, pull it out, flip it over, put it back in, pull out the plastic piece, leaving the record in there again. So that's where I saw most of my Bond films growing up, because we had the collection, up until the, mid '80s, whenever we moved on to Beta and then VHS or something like that. But those were great, and the artwork on those was fantastic. So I got to watch those early movies over and over and over again as a kid, probably up until For Your Eyes Only, maybe Octopussy. I think we had A View to a Kill. And then about that time is when we moved on to VHS and Beta.
So who was your Bond junkie?
Oh, my dad.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you are following the textbook, my dad introduced me to Bond type thing.
Oh yeah, exactly. So he had a Rolex watch that he got back in Europe before I was born, backpacking through Europe with my mom. So had that, so I got to see that, and then see Connery's, and they really highlight in Goldfinger, of course, with gets the good camera time there. So there was just always this Bond connection. And it always just spoke to me from a very early age. And then we had the books that I could just see, even though I was too young to read them. But I could watch those movies. And if I had the second grade, I'm not feeling too well, and both my parents would go off to work for the day, well, what I would do, I would stay home on that couch and watch Bond movies. That was
we are such a composite of similar influences. And I say that Bond fans, I call it the Bond community, they are tethered by these similar experiences, like fathers introducing this to us. And I will say that, no violins here, but I had a very busy father who was running his own companies. So he, like you, I wasn't into sports. He didn't throw the ball in the back. And even when I walked into the room, there was pipe smoke everywhere. It was that, era, if you will. And he's watching a sports game. He wouldn't sit down and go, now let me explain what's happening. So I didn't connect with that. What I did connect with, every time there was a James Bond film on, ABC or the reruns or anything like that, and they were all cut up to hell, he would say, hey, you need to watch this. Diamonds Are Forever is on, or this is on. And he's the one that introduced me to Bond. And I can't help but feel like, because we are a composite of our influencers, our first influencer has to be our family, that we are deeply rooted to James Bond because of our fathers. We have to be.
I think so. And there's something that when you watch that movie, it takes you back, whether you know it or not. You're that kid. I'm that 7-year-old kid on the couch with both my parents at work, home alone, watching Goldfinger for the umpteenth time, or From Russia with Love for the umpteenth time, or Dr. No for the umpteenth time, on that couch in that house that I remember have such great memories of growing up. So it's special.
So Jack, I'm going to make you lose half your audience potentially. What is that? Let's start with, what is the one Bond film that brings you back to childhood automatically?
I think it'd be Goldfinger and From Russia with Love, both those two. I don't know if I can. I think my first one, and I'm not sure if this is a conflation or if it's. I'm just not certain of the memory because it's so early. But I think for a while I thought Goldfinger was the first Bond that I saw, and then I realized I think I might have seen the ABC Sunday night movie or whatever it was of Live and Let Die. I think that might have actually been the first. Up at our cabin, one of our cabins had a TV, and but it only had like a couple channels, and it came in. I think that might have been actually the first. So I might have seen Roger Moore first, but I think I was so young. And then I think we got the video disc player when I was like 5. Maybe 6, and then it was Goldfinger, From Russia with Love, Dr. No, Thunderball, and You Only Live Twice, and all of those. And then by that point, of course, we have about at that point 1, 2, 3, 5 Roger Moore movies probably at that point, and watched all those. My first one in the theater though was Octopussy. because I was a little too young for Your Eyes Only. So I got to watch that with my grandmother on HBO. So I distinctly remember that every time it would come on. Na, 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 na. Like I remember the song and the whole thing that would set it up, and then boom. So you're into, and I loved. I think that's Roger Moore's. My favorite of the Roger Moore era is For Your Eyes Only. But I remember watching it with my grandmother on HBO, and every time it would come on, we watch it again. So by the time Octopussy comes out, now I'm old enough to go to the theater and see that. So the whole family went, and it was an event. I remember that one, and If You Do a Kill, I remember that one. I remember both of those, and Never Say Never Again, being events back in the 80s, and the whole family was there, and it was a big deal to go. And it wasn't just the first night, it was like, and it wasn't just opening weekend, it was like the first couple weeks of these movies being out, where they were events, and they were talked about in the paper, and they were and everyone was there, and you'd see your friends were there, and the friends' families, and you're walking out, and another family is walking in to go see it next at the 9:30 show if you saw the 7 o'clock one or whatever it is. So just such great memories of that time period. So, and then I've seen every one in the theater since, I think.
So since my only follow-up question is, those are your first ones, the ones that send you back to childhood, are they also amongst your favorite films?
Yes. From Rush with Love and Goldfinger. But I do have a special place in my heart for You Only Live Twice. I think it was because the ninja craze of the 80s, and I'm growing up. Those are formative times for me. And I think I read about Connery not really enjoying that film experience. I think I've read that. But I loved watching that as a kid, and for the most part filmed, or when you're watching it, is Japan. A couple, I think, it starts in Hong Kong, maybe, I forget exactly, but gosh, I love that movie. I love that one. I love
it too. First of all, I think it's one of the most beautiful James Bond movies. It looks like a brochure. I mean, just everything is filmed so beautifully. I don't understand people. They have a little bit of negativity towards that film.
Is that?
I don't know. I think because some of the previous ones have so much gravitas to them. You know, even when you think about Thunderball, they think, oh, there's slow pace, but it's the vacation movie. Like everything has a title, whereas You Only Live Twice is this sort of outlier. But I was also a child of the 1980s ninja craze. It's what started me in martial arts even back then. Yeah. So I was into like Sho Kosugi and American Ninja and all those things.
Remember The Master with Lee Van Cleef and Sho Kosugi? Remember that?
Every week I was there.
Timothy Van Patten, little shout out.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Sho Kosugi was the bad person and choreographer. And but just even beyond that, I like Sean Connery and You Only Live Twice. I said it publicly. I don't think he was sleepwalking through it.
Yeah,
Diamonds Are Forever.
Diamonds Are Forever is an odd one. And I remember thinking it was an odd one, even watching it back in the day. I remember thinking, and I believe, we could go look it up real quick, that Connery's only like 40 then. He looks
41.
He's 41. So he looks a lot older than a 41-year-old today, I would say, and a lot older than he looked in You Only Live Twice. Do you agree?
Jack, I'm a few days away from being 57, and I would take off my shirt before he should take off his shirt in movie. Diamonds Are Forever. I mean, yes, he was, let's just say, very comfortable in his own skin. And very weathered. And I understand during that time period, people did look older. If you watched, oh gosh, you must have watched this growing up a little bit at least, but I've just been catching reruns during the Christmas break over the $6 Million Man.
Oh, of course.
And I'm watching these $6 Million Man episodes from the early 70s, mid 70s. And I'm noticing, and I'm looking up these actors' ages, and they're so young, but they look so old. Yeah. So maybe that was the time and the fashion. I don't know.
But I think, but Diamonds Are Forever, he looks a lot older than he looked a couple of years earlier.
He does.
Yeah.
He does. Yeah. And then actually, I think he looks better. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he looks better in Never Say Never Again.
100%. 100%. When he's only like, by the way, he's only like 52.
Yeah.
Right? Ish.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like he's... But he looked, when I saw that as a kid, I thought he was like 70. When I saw that in the theater, I thought he's 70 years old. in that.
Yeah.
Because I've been watching, of course, from my early days, which is really only a few years before that, but I'm watching Dr. No and I'm watching all those ones. And then I'm seeing him here in Never Say Never Again. I'm like, oh, he's like 70 years old. How's he doing all this stuff? When he was really only 50 something, early 50s.
I know. It's interesting too, because Diamonds Are Forever, he has this osteoporotic haunch that he's doing. He's kind of like leaning down, where he doesn't have that in Never Say Never Again. It's almost like his pride is back. He's standing up straight and tall. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. But the whole history, I love the whole history of the films, the books, the adaptations, the Thunderball controversy, the Never Say Never controversy, the lawsuits, the whole thing. You know, it makes it such a great history to the whole thing. But I wanted to ask you specifically about Quantum of Solace, which comes from the short story title. I love the title, and I know you have been on a campaign, and I relate to this campaign that you've been on for people to revisit this film, because I didn't hate it. It's as you know, it's tough coming off a Casino Royale and going into anything that you're going to do after that. But I didn't realize until I saw you talking about it, and then I went back and rewatched it, about the editing. Because now that I'm in the Hollywood space and I have the shows and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm actually doing editing, I'm doing all that stuff, I went back and watched it with that eye. And then I saw what you were talking about, because I hadn't really watched it since it came out in the theater. I was pretty busy, SEAL teams, and then moving into this next phase of life. But I didn't not like it when it came out. I thought it was great. And I really want to go back, watch Casino Royale, and just not stop and make another bowl of popcorn and go right into Quantum right after that. Not stop and look at it as almost like one film. But I did watch it recently because of you, and I did notice the editing now that I went back.
Well, first of all, let me take you off my list of the campaign. Jack didn't hate Quantum. Got it.
I never hated it to begin with, but
that's one down, only 50 million people to go. I will say this. It hasn't been a formal campaign, but it's turned into something where I have so much affection for so many aspects of James Bond. And it's a bit of a poster child to James Bond films in general, meaning if you loved A View to a Kill, you probably have an understanding that it is, it's a bit of a dark horse in the world of James Bond. It won't make most people's top 10 lists. In fact, it'll probably be in the bottom 5 for many people. But you love it that much more because it is the bullied child. It is the one that gets sort of the hairy eyeball. And because of that, you feel this protection. You feel this, I don't know what it is, but something overcomes me with Quantum of Solace. And so I become this quasi-campaigner, if you will,
I love
of the movie. But deep down, I think it's a beautiful film. What I do like about it, and let's compare it to No Time to Die, because that's the easy one. It's Bond on a mission. He's on a mission. He is triumphant. He figures things out. He wins. He does some dastardly things, but he does it in the line of duty always. You know, he's got that emulation thing. He looks great. The style is unapproachable. The action is fantastic. Yeah. So what do we have? Well, we probably have a bad song, which the song's not great. It's a little clangy and things like that. We have some jarring editing. That is true. I mean, I have to give everybody that.
Yeah.
Right. The editing is confusing. And in fact, in Nolan's first Batman film, he decided to film all the action very close and in the dark. And I thought, my gosh, what a confusing thing to do to somebody trying to watch a film where you're trying to put them into the space. But for Quantum of Solace, Mark Forrester, he actually has a defense on the editing. For example,
he's only had a couple of weeks, right? He only had a 6 weeks or something.
It was timed, but he said that he did the editing on purpose. And the reason he said he did the car chase sort of accident on purpose is, he said, have you ever been in a car chase? Or have you ever been in a car accident? Yes or no, whatever your answer is. He goes, if you're in a car accident, you don't know which end is up. Things are happening, you are confused, and nothing makes sense. He goes, I wanted to immerse the audience member into a car accident that James Bond happens to get out of. The problem with that line of defense is he didn't stop that type of editing. I mean, he kind of kept it up until like the middle of the film.
Yeah. I'm very curious how they do it, because ours is very collaborative on the terminal list side of the house. There's all these different cuts, the director's cut, producer's cut, network cuts, multiple of each one of those things. Everyone's giving their notes in the executive producer team. Everyone's watching it, going back, watching it again, seeing which notes were incorporated, which ones they're all addressed some way, shape, or form. And the goal is to get the best product out that you possibly can. So I'm very curious how they edited that movie, how many people had input, how many people got to sign off on it. But in the recent watch, after I heard you talk about the editing, when he goes from the opera into the gunfight, I was kind of like, whoa, huh? When did this? And it's just all of a sudden type of the gun's out like this, I think. And like, what? Anyway, it was just, there were certain things like that. There's more questions than answers, I guess, when it comes to moving through that film.
I know what I tell people, and I'll tell you this. I think in that 94-minute film, there's an amazing 120-minute movie.
Yeah.
And if somewhere on some editing floor is an amazing 2-hour James Bond movie. I don't know, like the opera scene was so well done and the action so well rehearsed. And if you see behind the scenes shots, you're like, if that was the movie, we wouldn't have to defend it.
It was a transition from walking out of the thing into the gunfight. That was the one, because there's a music is a little bit different, which I'm okay with, but it was just semi choppy, I guess, abrupt.
Yes.
Taking us on that journey with him. All of a sudden, we're like, wait, what? Huh? How did this happen?
Your popcorn technique, by the way, of going from one movie to another is an experiment that all your listeners should do. My only suggestion is when Bond is rescuing Vesper in Casino Royale, that's when you make your bowl of popcorn.
Okay.
Don't do it in between movies.
Okay.
You'll lose the inertia.
You'll lose it. Okay. Good to know. Good tip. I love it. And I also found myself wondering when I rewatched it because of you recently, how Bond just gets backstage. And it's not only this one. I think Mission Impossible does it in one of them as well, where all of a sudden they're just like backstage at the opera, and walking around like no big deal. I don't know. I've never walked backstage like that at an opera. I guess you just open a door and you start walking around like you own it. Maybe. But
you just find your way.
Yeah. I mean, the guy does get that guy in the bathroom before and gets like the ID or something from that guy, maybe. But still a little bit more, maybe. But it was interesting hearing you talk about it, so I had to go rewatch it and
I appreciate that. For all us quantum lovers, thank you.
And there was some great thing. Also, what I really appreciated, and I noticed it the first time because I remember when I watched it this time, thinking, oh yeah, now I remember this from the first time. There were some nods back to previous eras of Bond, and of course we get the girl covered in oil this time, not gold. And some people could say, they're just rehashing this thing. Don't they have any new ideas? Or it's a nod to the past, which I like and appreciate. And then when he's on the roof, and the guy falls off the roof after they put that part of it, when we go back to The Spy Who Loved Me, and we have Roger Moore in one of his colder moments on top of the roof, and the guy has the tie, and I love that as a kid, and then he goes with the tie, and the guy falls off, so we have a little bit of a nod to that also in this.
Very good,
which I liked, and there was that, and then the walking through the desert also. In both films, from
Very Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah, Very Spy Who Loved Me. Walking
even both of them in evening wear,
clothes,
in dinner wear,
exactly.
With the tuxedo and the blue tuxedo, the Tom Ford one, gorgeous and very good, because a lot of people don't pick up the where's Feckish pyramids. Thank you. What a helpful chap.
So great. So,
but that's almost like a direct pull from that.
Yep, exactly. So I appreciate those. I do like that. I don't see it as like, oh, we're out of ideas. No, that seems like a cool kind of nod to a previous generation's Bond, and I do like that.
And by the way, I like that you are one of these Bond fans, because I love this. I love when people have different opinions, especially when they're different than mine. I think it's one of these like demilitarized zones, if you will, of like people can just have any opinion that they want, but they're willing to re-explore a lot of different films that they didn't think that they liked when they were younger, to see it with different eyes based on the filter of their experiences. Based on that, and I know this is another one of these big questions, do you have a wish list or desires for what a Bond 26 might be?
Well, what we talked about earlier. I mean, I would like to go back.
So, but a period piece, but do you want it to be just a straight mission? Do you want the Scooby Gang? Do you want it to be colleagues? Like, there's so many different aspects.
Yeah, no, I haven't really thought about it in those terms. I've only thought about it in terms of being contemporary or not. And odds are it'll be contemporary because Hollywood has they'll think long and hard before they do a period piece because of the extra cost associated with doing that.
Yes.
But I would like to see that because it would be a risk. It would solve a bit of the problem after killing off your character. That side of things. What do you think about that, by the way? And did you know it was coming? Did you?
Oh, absolutely not. No, I had no, there was discussion but every Bond film, they're like, oh, you think that this will be the one? And there was a little bit of discussion, and I was the individual, wrongfully, that kept telling everybody, guys, they're not going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. Stop it. Just stop talking.
Well, just like Fleming says in that interview I talked about earlier, my chap, I couldn't possibly afford it.
Yeah, I would go around. You can watch my older videos before it came out, and I was yelling at the screen, telling people to stop being so dour and negative and be positive about things. When I went to the premiere at Royal Albert Hall,
very cool,
and lights went up, applause, not thunderous applause. I turned to my wife and my friends who I was with, and I said, we were supposed to go to this big after party, and I said, I can't go yet. I need to go to any hotel, the closest hotel, and you get a drink. And I sat there with 2 or 3 of my closest friends and my wife, and we had a drink or 2, stiff drinks. And it was like a funeral. And we ran into a few people from the premiere there, and they were all like, David, what did you think of this? Are you all right? Like, they were coming over as if it was a condolence. It was an interesting move. I know promises were made. I know that they wanted to change things up. I always applaud them for being different. I think Casino Royale had some really unique approaches which paid off. Clearly, it's one of my favorite films. I think this was a bridge too far. I think the amount of hubris that goes into killing off a character like this, and especially one without potentially a definitive plan of, if you're going to say James Bond will return, it's a promise that should be kept within a certain time frame. That's the fans speaking.
Yeah. Why do you think they did it?
Well, I mean, if you go by what they literally said in interviews, it was because Daniel Craig had said to Barbara Broccoli way back when he made Casino Royale, I'll do these, but only if I can kill the character at the end. And she said, sure, never thinking that he would take her up on it. And I believe that he came back to do another one with the commitment behind it that the character would be killed off.
Why do you think he wanted to do that? Again, we have to bring that psychologist in, but
yeah. So
it seems like an odd thing to lead with if you're being offered one of the greatest roles in cinema history.
I'd love to believe. And I actually think Daniel Craig is a nice guy. I've met him. I've interviewed him. He's a good person.
Yeah.
But I think this was an artistic move. I think he wanted to do something very unique and different. What else could they do now? They would just make another Bond adventure to him. But if they killed off the character, it would have this heaviness. They would have a historical nature to it.
And he gets a distinct beginning, middle, and end to a run.
That's it. He has an arc. And you know something? Winner, winner, chicken dinner. They call it now in the Bond community the Daniel Craig arc. That it's this separate. This video disc.
Yeah, which helps maybe get them out of the conundrum that they're now in, having killed off their character.
I think so. Now, from a business standpoint, that's the fan point. From a business standpoint, boy, I can't. It's such a well-organized company, Ian. I can't believe that they went into this not thinking like, okay, guys, curtain's going to go up. He's dead. We say James Bond will return. what's the next stage? What's phase 2 of this, two-phased approach? So I'm not too sure what's transpired because that was 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's so interesting.
Sorry, 5 years ago.
Yeah. I find it so interesting. Unfortunately, they also bought back the one affordable Aston Martin and made it unaffordable again, the V8 Volante. That's the one that I would, because you could find one that wasn't crazy for a long time. And now I don't think you can because they brought it back. Is that
your sweet tooth Bond car?
No, I mean, obviously you go to DB5, but if one cannot afford the DB5 yet, then that is a good one to have in your quiver of Aston Martins, especially as a starter, I think. And I want to talk to you about yours as well. But it's also such a distinct look for that for that period of car because it comes from the mid '80s. And it's such a muscle car, and it's such a kind of a different thing. And we have Timonthy Dalton for just 2 films, and he's in that car for the first one, and it was a different look, but it was still obviously very Bond, and I just loved it. And
Timonthy Dalton, he was a badass Bond that I believe he's grown in appreciation.
He certainly has
with many fans, right?
Certainly has. Yep, I remember the reviews because I was reading everything I could all my life, and especially if it had anything to do with Bond, I'm reading that. And I remember the reviews that came out when his first the film came out, The Living Daylights, and they said things along the lines of this could be any movie. The character's just called Bond. Is any action movie now, and they just called the character Bond. I remember that distinctly, and think, well, not really, but I think he's definitely grown in appreciation from Bond fans over the years, and I wish we got a third. And people go, but Pierce Brosnan was so good in GoldenEye. Yes, true, but it wouldn't have been GoldenEye. It would have been those interim years where we're dealing with some legal issues and all the rest of it. So it would have been a 1992 Bond. Instead of a 1995.
They had not one, but 2 scripts. I've read part of one of the scripts.
Was it called Property of a Lady?
No, but one of the scripts was about robots. And almost like, what was the film with Tom Selleck? And there were these little robots.
Oh, the early days. Yeah. I can picture the VHS box right now.
And he had a really cool gun, too.
The gun thing up there. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean.
It was something like that, like almost like nanobot type, robot type things. That was one of the scripts. And the other script was sort of like another composite, but more of a mission, because License to Kill, which is the one that you're quoting that quote from, people thought it felt like Lethal Weapon with this James Bond character. But that's because the editors, the cinematographer, the musicians were all from the Lethal Weapon films.
Interesting.
So it had a sign of the times as far as that was concerned, but I would have loved a third Dalton film.
A third Dalton would have been fantastic. I wish we'd gotten that. And then, people can look at Property of a Lady. I think there's some stuff you can find out online about that and where that comes from. And it would have been just great to have a third one with him. That would have been absolutely fantastic. And let's talk about your car. When did you get the car? How long have you had the car? Because people understand, I think the clothes and the things that you have in the background of the show, but then you have the car and people think, wow, he's really into this.
Yeah, I have the Aston Martin Vantage. It's from 2006, the year of Casino Royale. Correct color, correct scheme, inside, outside, the whole 9 yards. And I've had the car for about 6 years. It only has about 16,000 miles on it, hardly anything. Okay. But this was happily my wife who encouraged me to get this car. We were traveling around in California and we passed an Aston Martin dealership. And she said, you've always wanted to test drive an Aston Martin. And I said to her, honestly, that's the worst tease that you could give a James Bond fan. Put them in this car and then rip it from them at the end of the day. And she goes, well, why don't you just test drive it? And I loved it. Of course I did. Pacific Coast Highway, driving an Aston Martin.
I mean, yeah.
Anything better? Yeah. So I come back in and she goes, do you want it? It's about your birthday. And we could afford it. And right then and there, we purchased the car and it was delivered 2 weeks later on this great platform truck with pomp and circumstance in front of my house. And
so great.
I can honestly say the allure and specialness of having a James Bond vehicle in your garage when you walk out and you see your daily drivers, and then there's that car that's a James Bond car, it never loses its specialness.
Oh, that's awesome.
Ever.
I love it. I love it.
It's like therapy.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, they're on my list. They're on my list. Certainly. What about, is it called the Q car? Who are those guys in Canada that built the DB5 replica with all a couple of years ago they started talking about it?
Oh, do you mean the official group that did this?
I think so. Isn't it? Didn't they do one like but it's all fabricated sense. It's not like a resto mod or anything like that. I think it's all like hand built, kind of to look. It looks like the DB5 and the movie, and has all the stuff in it. And I think it was like $1 million. It was almost like a Kickstarter campaign. It seemed like to me anyway. Like, kind of maybe give your $1 million in the hopes that we actually make this one day. But I think they did it, right?
There was a continuation model from Goldfinger that had all the parts and pieces and gadgets in there, made by a company out of London called Aston Martin Works.
Okay.
And they made this continuation vehicle that was $3.5 million a piece.
Okay.
So there must be...
I think there's a different one. I think I'm talking about a different one.
A different faction. But I know there's a gentleman in Las Vegas that took that idea of building a $3.5 million Goldfinger and said, meh, hold my beer. And he built a $5 million one. But this one is roadworthy, works, has everything under the sun.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. Well, one of those is on the list, as is the VA Volante, as is a more modern one. So, I'll get around to it at some point, but, I love it all. And going back to Daniel Craig for a moment, do you feel like once you get to Spectre that you need I think I heard the Critical Drinker say this online, that you need like a PowerPoint presentation to understand what's going on between that and the last film. It just gets very complicated, these relationships and what's happening and who's related to who, and what. It's almost overwhelming to an audience to try to figure out those last two films.
Yeah, a lot of that comes back to what they call Brofeld instead of Blofeld, the brother aspect between Blofeld and they call it Brofeld. Yeah, with Brofeld, it was one of those unnecessary plot points that the writers thought, all right, this is going to be a real twist. What if Bond and the main bad guy are related to each other? And then it all kind of skinnies down from there. And because of that, what I think happened was, instead of having this wonderful ending of Spectre where you could have an elongated, protracted, but satisfying ending within the evil layer. Like that's going back to like the 60s, which is really fantastic. You decide to have it like the Lord of the Rings movie where it ends 4 or 5 times. You have the evil villain layer, which you're there for a cup of coffee. Then you have another London layer. Then you have an explosion. Then you have, another at the end of the film. It's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
And it did confuse people, I think. And then
it's confusing.
Of course, you pick up No Time to Die, and then No Time to Die is a bit of the Godfather of films. They're killing everybody. Blofeld, and they're killing Felix, and they're killing, the mother, and they're killing Bond.
Yeah.
Just went on.
It was a lot. It was a lot to deal with. No doubt. And go back to Quantum for a moment. I do like the Bond M relationship in Quantum. And I know you have talked about that as well. So, and in the rewatch, it certainly comes through. So I really think that really works. I did like that. And I like the end. Of course, great end line. Fantastic. Snow coming down.
Oh my gosh.
You have to ask how M gets to where she is there in the street. You can there's certain things that you just have to kind of just go with. Not just in a Bond film, but in a book, in any film. I think, and this is the way I look at it, you can ask, and Bond movies can get away with it a little bit more, but you can ask an audience or a readership to go on one of these things with you, kind of once. But if you do it too many times in a row, you lose them. But you have the head of essentially British Secret Intelligence Services in the street, and I think it's Russia at the end, wherever they are standing in the snow, and that, but a great ending. I love the ending, but then also you have to take a moment to think, wait, who's this guy? Oh, I go back to the previous movie, and a photo shown for a second in the beginning of this one, and you're kind of like, wait,
Yeah.
Oh, now I think I get it. Okay, this is the Vesper guy. And we're getting it.
Nailing something really important and I think it's bookending our conversation about journeys. And if you don't create the right exposition, so it's not a significant enough impact and moment to the audience, then that journey at the end is not going to have the payoff because it took multiple viewings for people to realize, oh, that's Vesper's boyfriend that you see in the picture. And so, like, is he on a different mission that has no relatability to the movie? And then with No Time to Die, you have the added distraction of, and I'm just going to put it out there, I think a bad guy that wasn't written well. So then you've got kind of an ineffective villain. You've got all these changes and courses of work without telling a really important story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. That's true. But they're so much fun. They're all so much fun. And for you asked me my favorite movie or the most impactful one. Do you have one that you keep going back to, or do you have one that you have best memories of, or do you have a special one that stands out to you for whatever reason?
I think the one that stands out to me as special is the one that still makes me feel like I'm on vacation, which is Thunderball.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's dressed in shorts and at beaches and having a good time, and, you know, women are gorgeous, and it is a guilty pleasure. It's fantastic. It's not my favorite film. My favorite film is Casino Royale because it's, to me, the most complete. You know, it provides something for everybody. I love Daniel Craig in it. You know, it delivers everything that I'm looking for. So I've got my favorite, but I also have my, bring it on guilty moment.
Yeah. I got to see Casino Royale with my grandmother. It's the last movie we saw together in the theater. And we saw so many movies growing up together. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Blade Runner, War Games. I would see so many movies with her, and that was the last one that we got to see together in the theater before she passed away. So I have special memories of that. And that it was such a good one also is just adds to the what a great memory it was to go see that.
I wasn't even going to say that. I was going to let you insert that moment of, like, can you imagine if it ended on like a Die Another Day or something like that, and it just like, yeah, it was the last film we saw. No, it was Casino Royale. What a great. That's how I want to go.
Yeah, we'd seen so many movies together and all the James Bonds up to that point. So that was very special as well. And Brosnan years. We covered some Connery. We covered some Roger Moore, and some Dalton. The Brosnan years. I mean, GoldenEye. What a great. I don't know if people call it a reboot or not, but certainly a new era starts with GoldenEye and with Brosnan, the role that he was born to play, and that was fantastic. Saw that one with my dad, and that was that was a great film. What are your feelings on the Brosnan years?
I am so here for Brosnan. And it's interesting. What happens is, and you know this all too well, when you have the new kid in the block, like Daniel Craig comes on board, usually the previous king is usually shat on a little bit. And so there are people that have come off the Brosnan train. Not me. I loved GoldenEye. I'll tell you one better. The only one that I loved more than GoldenEye was Tomorrow Never Dies.
Oh, really?
I thought Tomorrow Never Dies was gooey pizza, James Bond, nonstop action, fun, great gadgets. Brosnan was out of his freshman year, so he was more relaxed in his skin as James Bond. The Bond girl, Michelle Yeoh, was amazing in it. And just everything about it just connected. And I like The World Is Not Enough. I think that is... To me, I see The World Is Not Enough as almost like the From Russia with Love, but Pierce Brosnan, in that it's a good spy film that has good exposition, good storytelling, good characters.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? You asked me about what happens next, and I forgot about this, but I did think at one point, though they won't do it, is that you could, since you've written yourself into a bit of a corner by killing off your character, that you would do something instead, and you're not going to go back and you're not going to do 1953 or 1952 when it's written. You are going to go ahead and you have Timothy Dalton or Pierce Brosnan at their current ages, and you're doing a Bond now, which oftentimes doesn't work out when you do that with it. But I don't know, it'd be something interesting to consider, because now they're in this place. Like, what do we do next? We killed this guy. There's all this controversy. It's all these years on. There's nothing on the horizon. And there's been a controversy in the news. Oh, what if we did that? We brought Brosnan back, and you have Bond brought out of retirement for some reason, because he can only, what happens to him? What happens to him after because in the book, I believe he is mid-30s or early 30s, and it's after the war. It's not his first mission in Casino Royale, so he's had a little bit of experience at the end of the war, and that's where we find him. So now we just find him, we find him later in life, having lived through all these missions that you kind of jumble together. And but now he's 70 something, and when we need him for whatever reason it is.
I would be pushing you out of the way to be first in line, because first of all, Brosnan looks great.
He looks really good. Do you see him in the sun?
He looks amazing. So he looks the part, and I hate to be like this, but here it goes, women want to be with him still, and men want to be him still. None of that has changed. He's got the acting chops. He's super suave. What is he? The spokesperson ambassador for Armani for a reason. I say put him in line. I would be right there for that. And by the way, Dalton too. Dalton is he kept himself together.
Yeah. So I think, that's an option. You could do something like that, because we never know. There's nothing like that. There's nothing like, what's Bond at 70, and why would we need to bring him back?
As long as it doesn't turn into like a Murder, She Wrote, or like the last Indy film where Indy's like sitting on horses and motorcycles, and
that's what I
mean. The
mean.
movie's happening around him versus him being the movie.
That's what I mean. Like, you have to be careful. You can't try to rewrite it like those books we talked about. It has to be Bond. It has to be a Bond film.
Exactly.
He just happens to be 70 years old. What's happened since 50 to 70? What's he been doing? And why do we need him back?
I'd be there for that.
Come on. Maybe they'll listen to this. One of those two, because it's so different than just doing another new contemporary one with, whatever actor they end up with. But I think that'd be fantastic. I wanted to ask you about the shirt. Also, you have your shirt. Is it from Peel? Who does you have the Zaritsky shirt?
Oh, yes. It's a group out of Portugal called Atelier. It's a wonderful small company. I love small companies like you love small companies. And they had come to me. It was a wonderful surprise. They said, we've been a fan of your channel. We put together a mood board, and we think we've put together a line of clothing. And certainly this shirt was the starting sound of it. That, fit like you like, same type of cloth and substance and cut, and very Fleming-like, but very Bond-like. And they put all that together, which was insane.
That's awesome. I saw that. I got so excited when I saw that you were doing that.
We'll send you one if you'll wear it.
Oh, that's nice. That's very kind. I've been meaning to get one. It's been a little.
No, don't. We'll get you. And actually, there's a little bit of a line coming out. This is so embarrassing to say out loud, but a kind of a Zaritsky line coming out of like terry cardigans and things like that, and just.
Oh, that's great.
Sort of straddling the line of what's influenced me and sort of what I like. But I think we're all sort of cut from the same cloth, excuse the pun. So I think that we all sort of gravitate to similar things.
I love it. Oh, man, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. And this question would be easier if we had your normal background behind you. Is there a part of your collection, a piece of your collection that is the most important to you, or a favorite? I don't like the word favorite. I feel like it's too easy of a word to use, but is there something in there that you're either proud of or have a personal connection to, or something that that means the most to you? Or is there something in there in that collection? Because you have a lot of really cool things when it comes to Bond.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the easy one for me to say, because I talked about it before a little bit, is I do have a screen-used Armani jacket that Daniel Craig wears in Casino Royale in the airport scene.
That's right.
And it's one of these really identifiable things. When the light hits, you can see like the watermarks still. And it still has the watermarks or, oil marks, whatever they had on it. And it's one of these pieces where there is a jaw-dropping moment when people come into the collection and go, my gosh, he wore that? And then very often, if they're the right size or even sort of the right size, I'll have them wear it and take a picture in it, because I'm not precious with my things. I want them to be enjoyed. But that's probably the most important one. There's got to be one in there. You know what? The most special one, which is different than the most important one, probably is my first Omega watch, which was when Tomorrow Never Dies came out. And it was more money I've ever spent on anything back then. And I was like shaking spending that much money. And my wife, who's been so supportive, encouraged me to get this, and just, looking down at it for weeks on end and just not believing that I have it. And of course, I still have it and still wear it very often. And it's just a very special moment. It was almost like an entry into this crazy world of Bond style that I'm in.
I love it. I love it. The watches are so important. I mean, I think most people that are in this, I shouldn't say most, a lot of people in the Bond community are watch people, it would seem. And the evolution of watches over time, and which one was Connery really wearing there, and that sort of a thing. And then obviously we know the Goldfinger one, but it's also fascinating. Then we get to the 70s, and it's also so great. This one actually, so this one is, and where did you get your first one? Did you get it in New York? Your first Omega?
Where did I get my first one? I think I got it on Long Island. So somewhere in Long Island.
But not with the guy that you introduced me to.
No, that was a later relationship.
Yeah, he's fantastic, by the way. So that's where that one came from.
Dario.
And this one, Dario. Shout out to Dario in New York. If anybody's there, wants to go to the boutique, the Omega boutique, it's so much fun. So that one here, the Die Another Day one, is from Budapest. So I got it as a little present to myself after we wrapped filming on the show. We finished up in Budapest this last October, and so went in, and they happened to have one in there, so I picked it up in Budapest.
Now, do you have a series of Bond watches, or am I looking at your collection right now?
No, this is the Omega. These are the two Omegas that I have. They did a one that's not a Bond one, but is a seal version that they did for just seals. They came out. They didn't advertise it or anything like that, and I probably should not even be talking about it, perhaps. But so I'll have that one as a third one. But like you, I do want to have the collection, and I do want to go back and get the Submariner. I'll have to, eventually working on it, and have them all like lined up like that. I think that'd be really cool to have them all lined up. But
the Submariner Rolex is a very special watch. I mean, it was one thing. I'm a pretty dedicated Omega loyalist, but there was something about the Submariner that I had to get the no date version. Sort of the Connery Moore amalgamation, if you will. And it's a beautiful watch, and it's a piece of heritage and history.
Yeah. No, it really is. I have one from 1968. It's not the same model that Connery wears in Goldfinger, but it's the one that my character in the James Reese novels that he gets from his dad, or that he eventually gets from the guy who killed his dad. If anybody hasn't read the books, little spoiler. So I do now have one that you could have gotten in Vietnam in 1968. So that one has been added, but it's not it's a newer version than the one that Connery wears in Goldfinger. But I'm a watch person, so I'm working on it. I'm not quite to your level yet, but I'm working on it.
We all aspire to be something.
Oh man, awesome! And it's so nice being able to sit down and hang out for a bit.
This has been great, and what your audience should realize is we have to put a stop to this eventually, because when you get two Bond fans together, especially as people passionate as us, you could go into the night with drinks and all these types of things.
Oh, but I don't want to forget this before that. So thank you for this. Also, this was so cool. It was such a surprise to get this from you. The man with the golden gun, right here, commemorative coin that you sent me, and I really appreciate this. And I appreciate the stationery that your note was written on as well. This is just super cool. So thank you so much for sending this. It's up in my little bar area where I have a couple of Bond things up there, and it sits up there like that. So very cool. Really appreciate that.
I'm so glad. Well, I know you talk about challenge coins. You put your own challenge coins into some of your press kits. And I'm like, something? There's a limited amount that the Perth Mint minted of these things. We're in our anniversary year, or we were, of this movie. And, Yeah, it's just something fun that, from one Bond fan to another.
Well, it's certainly appreciated. And man, yeah, we got to sit down at some time in person, hopefully at one of the events, maybe in, I don't know, maybe next time. Anyway, we'll figure something out to link up in person. And for everybody else out there, the Bond experience, love all the stuff that you put out there. It's also fantastic. It's all so much fun. And Instagram, and that's the one that I'm on. You're probably on Facebook also. But
it's mostly YouTube and Instagram.
Okay.
So the videos are really on YouTube, and people can watch the crazy videos there. And then Instagram is daily dopamine pushes of Bond images and a James Bond lifestyle. If you're into the lifestyle itself, it's a nice fix there.
Yeah, it's super. It's so fun, and it's also great. You have, before I let you go, is there one interview or one topic or one video that has been the most fun for you to do as a fan? You always have so much fun doing, it looks like, all of them, but is there one that stands out that was so much fun for you to do?
I will say that when I interviewed Barbara Broccoli, it was both incredibly nerve-wracking. It was the only time I've ever gotten nervous in an interview. I just don't get nervous. Maybe I should, but I don't. But then I did.
Yeah, I see that.
Maybe just, the gravitas, being a powerful character, obviously, and accomplished individual, being at the heart of something I'm so passionate about, maybe had a lot to do with that. But believe it or not, the most fun that I had was interviewing Daniel Craig.
Oh, great.
And the reason being is we had talked a couple times beforehand casually. And when I interviewed him, I could tell he had been interviewed, and you get this, I'm sure, all the time, by the typical journalist. It's like, what's your favorite gadget? And, what's your favorite car? And I just took it from a different way. And for 25 minutes, we spoke about clothing and watches and stuff he loves. And so right out of the gate, he knew this was going to be different. And so a lot of people, when they watch that interview on YouTube, they start, and his body language is very closed in. And, by the end of it, he's open, he's talking, he's opening his arms, he's laughing, he's telling jokes. And for me, it was just so fun to see that, I'm going to say it, Daniel Craig character arc during those 25 minutes was a lot of fun to see.
Oh, that's fantastic. Oh.
Yeah.
Do you have every Crockett and Jones collection? I stopped by there when I was in New York too. I didn't realize they have a Goldfinger edition shoe out. I just saw that recently.
And it's beautiful.
I'm going to pick those up. Those are, they make such great shoes. And I know Daniel Craig is why it reminded me of it, because I know he's a big fan.
Huge fan. A lot of the brands, people probably know this listening, that they're fans, they came from Daniel Craig. I mean, the Billy Reed Skyfall peacoat was his personal peacoat.
Oh, wow.
That he wanted in the film, and talking with Jenny Tamine, the costume designer, they collaborated and said, something, this is the right jacket for the right story and the right moment. We're going to put your jacket in the film. And, they wound up selling millions and millions and millions of peacoats because of that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Man, awesome. Well, thank you for spending all this time with me today. So I was so looking forward to doing this with you and getting to talk a little bit about, maybe in the future we'll do something where we go through, well, we'll certainly have to jump back on if we get another film here, when we get another film, and maybe go through a few more of the books, a few more of the films in general. But we'll get back together at some point soon, I'm sure.
I'm looking forward to it, Jack. Don't be a stranger. And again, we'll get together in person next time.
Sounds great. You take care.
Take care.
If you enjoyed this episode, click here to watch another episode, or click here to watch a clip of the podcast.